No one noticed when I first arrived at the family lunch. My daughter Sharon had been planning it for weeks. Her famous pot roast, the good china. Everyone gathered around the table like we were some perfect family from a TV commercial. I sat quietly at the end of the table, watching them all talk over each other, my arthritis making my fingers stiff around my water glass. That's when I heard it. My grandson Louis, looking right at me while talking to his cousin, didn't even bother to lower his voice. She's still alive? This old lady is lasting longer than a promise. The table erupted in laughter. My son-in-law nearly choked on his beer. My daughter Jenny tried to hide her smile behind her napkin. Even Sharon, who had invited me, pressed her lips together to keep from laughing. I sat there, the words hitting me like a physical blow. 74 years on this earth, and this is what I had become to them. A joke, an inconvenience, someone who had overstayed her welcome in this world. I had raised them. After Harold died from his heart attack 30 years ago, I had done everything alone. I worked 2 jobs so Sharon could go to college. I babysit Louis and his siblings while my daughter built her career. I drained my savings to help them with down payments on their homes. And now I was just the old lady who wouldn't die fast enough. I didn't say a word. I simply reached into my purse and pulled out the envelope I had picked up from my lawyer's office that morning. My updated will. I had planned to tell them about it later privately. Instead, I placed it on the table, the words "Last Will and Testament of Pamela June Morrison," clearly visible on the front. The laughter died instantly. Sharon's fork clattered against her plate. "Mom," she said, her voice suddenly concerned. "What's that?" I stood up slowly, my joints aching with the effort. "I think I've lost my appetite," I said quietly. "Thank you for lunch." "Grandma, I was just joking," Louis said, but I could hear the panic in his voice. He wasn't sorry about what he'd said. He was worried about what it might cost him. I left without another word, the silence behind me heavy with shock. I could already imagine the frantic whispers that would start the moment the front door closed behind me. That night, alone in the house that Harold and I had bought 50 years ago, I sat in my rocking chair by the window. The same chair where I had rocked Sharon when she had colic. Where I had held Louis when he was just a tiny thing with colic, crying through the night while his mother got some sleep. The phone rang 5 times. I let it go to voicemail. Sharon apologizing but not really. Jenny, asking if I was okay but quickly turning the conversation to whether I was thinking clearly. My son-in-law, awkwardly trying to smooth things over while fishing for information about the will. I had always planned to split everything evenly between my children and grandchildren. The house would go to Sharon since she had always loved it. My savings, not much but something, would be divided among the grandkids for college. My jewelry would go to Jenny. But sitting there in the dark, I realized something. All these years I had been saving everything for them. My money, my time, my dreams. After Harold died, I never took that trip to Paris we had always talked about. I never went back to college to finish my degree in art history. I never even dated again, too busy helping with birthdays and graduations and wedding showers. I gave them everything. And what did I get in return? A grandson who joked about how long it was taking me to die. I picked up a framed photo from the side table, all of us at Christmas last year. Everyone smiling. Was it all fake? Had they been waiting for me to die even then? I set the picture down, unable to look at their faces. For the first time in decades, I allowed myself to cry, really cry, the kind of tears that leave you breathless and hollow. By morning, my decision was made. If they wanted my legacy so badly, they would have to earn it. And I had just enough time left to make sure they understood exactly what they had taken for granted. The phone rang again. Sharon. This time I answered. "Mom, thank goodness," she said, her voice overly sweet. "We're all so worried about you. Louis feels terrible. He wants to come over and apologize in person." I closed my eyes, suddenly exhausted by the performance. "That won't be necessary," I said. "I have some thinking to do. I'll call you when I'm ready to talk." "But Mom, about that envelope." "Goodbye, Sharon." I hung up before she could say another word. Outside my window, spring was just beginning. The dogwood tree Harold had planted was blooming. In all these years of putting everyone else first, I had forgotten something important. I was still alive. And it was finally time to start living for myself. The visit started the very next day. First Sharon bringing a casserole I didn't ask for, her eyes darting around my living room as if mentally cataloging what would soon be hers. Then Jenny, who rarely visited more than twice a year, suddenly concerned about the drafty windows in my house. My son-in-law Robert stopped by to fix that loose porch step, something he'd ignored for 3 years despite my mentions. But Louis stayed away. He's just embarrassed, Sharon explained, refilling my teacup without asking if I wanted more. You know how kids are. He's 27, I replied. Hardly a child. Sharon's smile tightened. Well, he's always been sensitive. He didn't mean anything by it. I let her words hang in the air between us, neither agreeing nor disagreeing. The silence made her uncomfortable. Good. Mom, she finally said, leaning forward. About that envelope you brought to lunch. What about it? We're just concerned. Have you been feeling okay? No confusion or anything. The implication was clear. If I changed my will, I must be losing my mind. I'm perfectly fine, Sharon. My doctor gave me a clean bill of health last month. My blood pressure is better than yours, in fact. She laughed nervously. Of course. It's just big decisions about, well, assets and such. They're important to think through carefully. I agree, I said, sipping my tea. That's exactly what I've been doing. Later that afternoon, after everyone had finally left, I sat in my garden enjoying the peace. The roses needed pruning. Harold always said roses were like people. They needed both care and space to truly thrive. I had given my family too much care and not enough space to grow on their own. My phone buzzed with a text from my oldest friend, Margaret. How did it go with the vultures? She asked. Margaret never minced words, which was why I loved her. About as expected, I texted back. Sharon practically measured the drapes. And the golden grandson? Nowhere to be seen. Margaret's response came quickly. Coward. She was right. Louis had always been the favorite, the golden child. Sharon and Robert had spoiled him rotten, and I had been no better. When he needed money for college, I gave it. When he crashed his first car, I helped buy a new one. When he needed a security deposit for his apartment, and this was my thanks, becoming the punchline to his cruel joke. The next day I had an appointment with my lawyer, Thomas. He'd been handling my affairs since Harold died, and over the years had become a trusted friend. Are you sure about this, Pam? He asked, reviewing the notes I'd brought him. It's a big change. I'm sure, I said. They've shown me exactly who they are. It's time I believed them. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. It will cause quite a stir. Let it. I won't be around to see it anyway, I said with a wry smile. That evening I overheard something that confirmed I was making the right decision. I had gone to bed early, but remembered I'd left my medication in the kitchen. As I approached the stairs, I heard voices from my living room, Sharon and Louis, who apparently had finally shown up. Did you see the statement from her investment account? Louis was saying. It's less than we thought. I know, Sharon sighed. All these years she's been acting like she's sitting on a fortune. The house is the only real asset, and it needs a ton of work. Maybe she spent it already, Louis said. Old people get weird about money. Lower your voice, Sharon hissed. She might hear you. So what if she does? What's she going to do, change her will? You said yourself she's already been acting strange. Their words landed like stones in my stomach. They weren't concerned about me, they were disappointed by what they were going to get. They were discussing my assets, my life's work, as if I were already gone, as if my only value was what I would leave behind. I backed away silently, my heart pounding in my chest. The medication could wait until morning. In my room I sat by the window looking at the street where I had lived most of my adult life. I watched Sharon's car pull away an hour later, Louis in the passenger seat, neither of them bothering to come up and check on me before leaving. The next morning I called Margaret. Remember that trip to the Grand Canyon we always talked about taking? I asked when she answered. Since 1982, she laughed. Why, you finally ready to go? I looked at the family photo I had placed face down on my nightstand the day before. Yes, I said firmly. I think it's finally time. When I hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. A lightness, a sense of possibility. My family was waiting for me to die, counting the days, counting my dollars. But I wasn't dead yet. Not by a long shot. And if they thought I was going to sit quietly and fade away while they planned how to spend my money, they were about to be very, very disappointed. The morning after I overheard Sharon and Louis, I called Thomas again. "I need you to help me with something else," I said, explaining what I'd heard. "That's disappointing," he said, always diplomatic. "But not surprising, unfortunately. I want to know exactly what they'll do when they think I'm not watching," I told him. "Can you help me?" Thomas was silent for a moment. "What did you have in mind?" The plan we devised was simple. Thomas would let slip to Sharon, who occasionally used the same bank, that I had been discussing my accounts with him. He would mention, casually, concerns about my changing priorities. Then we would wait and see what happened. I didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, Sharon invited me to Sunday dinner. "The whole family will be there," she insisted. "Even Louis. He really wants to make things right." I accepted, curious to see this performance. When I arrived, everyone was painfully polite. Louis, freshly shaven and wearing a button-down shirt instead of his usual t-shirt, hugged me at the door. "I'm really sorry, Grandma," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "It was a stupid joke." I patted his cheek. We all say things we don't mean sometimes. Throughout dinner they took turns being attentive. Ginny refilled my water glass before it was empty. Robert asked about my garden. Sharon served me the largest piece of pie. And Louis sat next to me, asking questions about the old days, something he'd never shown interest in before. "Tell me about when you and Grandpa bought the house," he said, his eyes never quite meeting mine. I told the story I told 100 times, about how Harold and I had saved for years, eating beans and rice, working extra shifts to afford the down payment, how we'd painted every room ourselves, planted the dogwood tree as a symbol of our new beginning. "That's really something," Louis said. "Real estate was such a good investment back then. The house must be worth, 4 or 5 times what you paid." And there it was. The real reason for his sudden interest in family history. "I suppose," I said vaguely, "though it needs quite a bit of work these days." I watched his face fall slightly. Sharon quickly jumped in. "We've been saying you should hire someone to help maintain it, Mom. It's too much for you now." "Or," Louis added, trying to sound casual, "you could always sell it. Downsize to something easier to manage." I took a bite of pie, letting the suggestion hang in the air. "This is delicious, Sharon. Is it a new recipe?" After dinner, while the others cleared the table, Louis cornered me in the living room. "Grandma, I've been thinking," he said, sitting close beside me on the sofa. "I know I haven't always been the most attentive grandson. I want to change that." "Oh." I kept my expression neutral. "Yeah, I mean, family is everything, right? And I want to help you with anything you need." He hesitated, then added, "Ginny mentioned you were talking to your financial advisor. If you ever want a second opinion, I took some business classes. I could look things over for you." So that was their game. Thomas had been right. Sharon had told the others about our supposed conversation, and now they were worried I might be changing how my money was invested. Or worse, from their perspective, giving it away. "That's very thoughtful," I said. "But I trust Thomas. He's been handling my affairs for 30 years. Louis's smile tightened. "Sure, but sometimes these old-school advisors don't know about newer investment opportunities. I've been reading about some really promising." "Louis," I interrupted gently, "are you having money troubles?" His face flushed. "What?" "No, I'm fine. This isn't about me. I'm just trying to help you." But I could see the truth in his eyes. Louis had always been a terrible liar. Whatever scheme he was planning, whatever he hoped to gain from suddenly becoming the devoted grandson, it wasn't just about my eventual inheritance. He needed money now. Later that night, alone in my bedroom, I opened the antique cedar chest at the foot of my bed. Harold had made it for our 5th anniversary, and over the decades, it had become a repository for my most precious memories. I dug beneath the baby clothes I'd kept from Sharon and Jenny, past Harold's letters from our courtship, until I found what I was looking for, a small leather-bound book. My bucket list started on my 40th birthday, then abandoned after Harold died. The pages were slightly yellowed now, But my handwriting was still clear. Visit the Grand Canyon. Learn to paint. See Paris in the spring. Take a cooking class. Learn to swim. Simple dreams, most of them. Things that had seemed so attainable once. Things I had set aside because there was always something more important. A grandchild's graduation, a daughter's divorce, a roof that needed replacing. I ran my fingers over the pages, feeling a wave of regret. What would Harold think of what our family had become? Of what I had allowed myself to become? I closed the book and held it to my chest. I hadn't protected myself, but I could still protect what Harold and I had built together. I could still honor the dreams we once shared. The next morning I called Thomas again. I've made my decision, I told him. I want to move forward with everything we discussed. Are you sure? He asked. Once we set this in motion. I'm sure, I said, my voice stronger than it had been in years. It's time. 2 weeks after that revealing family dinner, I invited everyone to my house. I have an announcement to make, I told Sharon over the phone. Something important. Word spread quickly. By that evening my phone was buzzing with texts from the entire family. All suddenly available at a moment's notice. When the day arrived, I prepared carefully. I wore my best dress, the blue one Harold always loved. I baked cookies, set out coffee and tea, and waited. They arrived together, as if they'd coordinated beforehand. Sharon entered first, eyes darting around the living room, perhaps looking for moving boxes or real estate brochures. Jenny followed, then Robert. Louis came last, hanging back slightly, his usual confidence dimmed. Sit down, everyone, I said, gesturing to the sofa and chairs. I have something important to tell you. They exchanged glances, a silent conversation passing between them. Sharon cleared her throat. Mom, before you say anything, we've been talking, and we want you to know we're concerned about you living alone in this big house. I smiled. That's actually related to what I wanted to discuss. Their faces brightened, and I could almost see the thoughts racing through their minds. She's selling the house. She's moving to assisted living. She's finally giving us what we want. I'm making a change, I continued. A big one. Louis leaned forward, unable to contain himself. What kind of change, Grandma? I took a deep breath. I'm going to travel. I've booked a trip to Paris next month. The silence that followed was deafening. Sharon's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Jenny blinked rapidly. Louis's face darkened. Paris. Sharon finally managed. Alone? Mom, that's not safe at your age. I won't be alone. Margaret is coming with me. Margaret from your garden club? Jenny asked, her voice rising. But she's my age. I finished for her. Yes, we're both old. But we're not dead yet. Robert coughed uncomfortably. Pam, international travel is expensive. Have you thought this through? I've thought of nothing else for weeks, I said. My mind's made up. Louis couldn't contain himself any longer. Is this because of what I said at dinner? Grandma, it was a joke. You don't need to spend your savings just to prove something. There it was, their real concern. Not my safety, not my happiness, but my money. Their inheritance. This isn't about proving anything, Louis. It's about living my life while I still can. I reached for the folder beside me and pulled out a glossy brochure. After Paris, Margaret and I are considering a river cruise through Germany. Sharon stood up abruptly. Mom, this is crazy. You need to think about your future. I am thinking about my future. My future, Sharon. Not yours. The room fell silent. Jenny fidgeted with her wedding ring. Robert studied the floor. Louis stared at me, a mixture of anger and disbelief on his face. Is there something else going on here? Sharon finally asked, her voice strained. Has someone been influencing you? That lawyer of yours, perhaps. I laughed, genuinely amused. The only person influencing me is me. For the first time in decades. But what about, Louis began. The house. I finished for him. It's still mine, Louis. And it will be until I decide otherwise. They stayed another hour trying different tactics. Concern for my health. Warnings about scammers targeting seniors abroad. Gentle reminders about being responsible with the family legacy. But I held firm. As they left, I hugged each of them, including Louis, who remained stiff in my embrace. I love you all, I said sincerely. That will never change. Sharon was the last to leave. At the door she turned to me, her eyes watery. For a moment I thought I saw a glimpse of the daughter I remembered. The one who used to crawl into my lap after a nightmare. The one who cried on my shoulder when her first boyfriend broke her heart. Mom, she said softly. We just want what's best for you. I touched her cheek gently. Then be happy for me, Sharon. That's all I ask. After they left, I sat alone in my quiet house, emotions washing over me in waves. Guilt for perhaps being too harsh. Sadness for what our relationship had become. But mostly a surprising sense of liberation. I picked up my phone and called Margaret. How did it go? She asked. About as expected. They think I've lost my mind. Margaret laughed. Perfect. That means we're doing something right. Did you tell them about the house? Not yet. One bombshell at a time. We talked a while longer, finalizing details for our trip. When I hung up, I walked through my home, touching the familiar walls, the furniture Harold and I had chosen together, the photographs chronicling a lifetime of memories. This house had sheltered my family through so much: birthdays and holidays, rainstorms and blizzards, joy and grief. It had been a constant in all our lives. And soon it would serve one final purpose. I went to my desk and wrote a note to Thomas, confirming our next steps. Then I sat by the window, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant golds and pinks. For the first time in years I felt truly alive. Not just existing, not just waiting for the end, but living purposefully. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. My family would resist, perhaps even try to stop me. But I was ready. Harold always said I was the strongest person he knew. It was time I remembered that strength. Paris was everything I had dreamed it would be. Margaret and I spent 3 glorious weeks wandering cobblestone streets, visiting museums and sipping coffee at sidewalk cafes. We took pictures by the Eiffel Tower, got lost in Montmartre, and ate pastries until our clothes felt tight. For the first time in decades, I wasn't someone's mother or grandmother or widow. I was just Pamela, a woman experiencing the world. My family's reaction was predictable. Sharon called daily, her messages growing increasingly concerned when I didn't immediately respond. Jenny sent passive-aggressive texts about selfish choices and irresponsible spending. Louis remained silent, which worried me more than any angry text could have. On our last night in Paris, Margaret and I shared a bottle of wine on our hotel balcony, watching the city lights twinkle against the darkening sky. I don't want to go back, I admitted. Margaret patted my hand. I know, but you have to finish what you started. She was right. The trip had been wonderful, but it was only the beginning. The real test was yet to come. When I returned home, tanned and rejuvenated, I found my mailbox stuffed with letters, bills, advertisements, and a thick envelope from Thomas. Inside was everything I needed for the next phase of my plan. I was still unpacking when the doorbell rang. Sharon stood on my porch, arms crossed. You're back, she said, as if I'd only been gone for an afternoon. I am. I smiled, stepping aside to let her in. She followed me to the kitchen, where I was arranging the macarons I'd brought back from a little shop near Notre Dame. You didn't answer most of my calls, she said, accusation heavy in her voice. I was busy experiencing Paris, dear. I offered her a macaron, which she declined with a tight shake of her head. Mom, we need to talk. Sharon sat at the kitchen table, her posture rigid. This behavior of yours has everyone worried. Behavior? I echoed, sitting across from her. The sudden trip. The spending. It's not like you. I smiled gently. Actually, it is like me. The real me. The me I was before I became so focused on taking care of everyone else that I forgot to live my own life. Sharon's expression softened slightly. Mom, no one is saying you can't enjoy your retirement. But these extravagant trips were paid for with my money, I finished firmly. Money I earned, money Harold and I saved together. But, Sharon, I interrupted, why does it bother you so much that I'm spending my own money? Her cheeks flushed pink. It doesn't. I worry about your future. What if you need care? What if there are medical expenses? I've thought of all that, I assured her. I'm not being reckless. She didn't look convinced. The family is concerned, Mom. especially after what Thomas told me about you discussing major changes to your accounts. So Thomas had played his part well. I appreciate your concern, I said, keeping my voice gentle. But my finances are my business. Sharon's eyes hardened. When it affects the whole family, it becomes our business too. There it was. The mask slipping again. And how exactly, I asked carefully, does my spending my own money affect the whole family? She hesitated, caught in her own words. I just meant, we care about you. We want what's best. I'm glad to hear that, I said, standing up, because I've made a decision I think is best for everyone. I pulled Thomas's envelope from my purse and slid it across the table. I've decided to make a change to the house. Sharon's hands trembled slightly as she opened the envelope. Her eyes scanned the document inside, then widened in shock. A renovation, she gasped. You're spending money on renovating? Not just renovating, I corrected. Converting. The upstairs will become a separate apartment with its own entrance. I'm going to rent it out. The color drained from her face. Rent it? To strangers? Mom, this house has been in our family for 50 years. And it still is. I'm just making better use of the space. This will cost a fortune. She waved the contractor's estimate in the air. It's an investment, I explained calmly. The rental income will supplement my retirement and cover property taxes. Sharon stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. You need to discuss these decisions with us before you make them. No, Sharon, I don't, I said, my voice firm but not unkind. That's what I'm trying to help you understand. This is my life. My house. My choice. She stared at me, a storm of emotions crossing her face. Anger, disbelief, and something else. Fear. Fear that the careful plans she and the others had made for my assets were crumbling. Does Louis know about this? She finally asked. Louis? Why would he specifically need to know? She flushed again. He's been talking about maybe buying a house in this neighborhood. He always loved this house growing up. Now I understood. They had already decided among themselves who would get what. Louis had claimed my house in their imaginary distribution of my assets. Louis is welcome to buy a house wherever he wants, I said. But this one isn't available. Not now, not soon. Sharon left shortly after, taking the contractor's estimate with her, presumably to show the others. I knew what would come next. A family intervention. The intervention came 3 days later, on a Sunday afternoon. They arrived together again, but this time without the pretense of casual visiting. Sharon's expression was grim, Jenny looked like she'd been crying, and Robert kept checking his watch as if he had somewhere more important to be. Louis entered last, his face a mask of barely contained anger. I had prepared for this. The living room was spotless, photographs of the family prominently displayed on every surface. I wanted them to see themselves everywhere they looked, the birthdays, the Christmases, the graduations, all the moments I had been there for them, supporting them, loving them. Sit down, I said, gesturing to the sofa and chairs. Would anyone like tea? No one responded. Sharon took charge as always. Mom, we've had a family meeting about your recent decisions. I see, I said, settling into Harold's old armchair. And what have you decided about my life? Jenny winced at my tone. Louis scowled. Sharon pressed on. We think you're making hasty choices without considering the consequences. First the trip, now these expensive renovations. The trip was wonderful, I interrupted. I should have gone years ago. That's not the point, Sharon said, her patience visibly thinning. The point is, you're spending money like it doesn't matter, making permanent changes to the family home. My home, I corrected gently. Without consulting any of us, she finished as if I hadn't spoken. Louis couldn't contain himself any longer. Grandma, this is crazy. You're going to let strangers live in our house? Where we grew up. Where we made memories. I looked at him steadily. Louis, when was the last time you visited before I left that will on the table? 6 months ago? Longer. He had the grace to look embarrassed, but only for a moment. That's not fair. I've been busy. Life is busy for everyone, I acknowledged. But we make time for what matters to us. Sharon cut in. Mom, we're getting off track. The issue is your sudden change in behavior. We're worried about you. Are you worried about me? Or are you worried about what I might do with my money? The question hung in the air like a thundercloud. No one seemed to know how to respond. Finally, Jenny spoke up, her voice small. Mom, that's not fair. We love you. I believe you do, I said sincerely. In your way. But love and respect aren't the same thing. Robert cleared his throat. Pam, we just want to make sure you're thinking clearly. These decisions impact all of us. How? I asked simply. How does my traveling or renovating my house impact you? No one answered directly. Instead, Sharon tried another tactic. Mother, what happens if these renovations go wrong? Construction always costs more than planned. What if you run out of money? Who will take care of you then? I smiled. I appreciate your concern, but I've planned carefully. Thomas has helped me create a budget that allows for contingencies. Thomas, Lewis muttered. That old fossil should have retired years ago. Thomas has been a loyal friend and advisor for 30 years, I said sharply. And unlike some people, he respects my decisions. Lewis flushed red. The others exchanged glances. I think, I said, rising from my chair, it's time for me to be very clear. I love all of you. You are my family and nothing will change that. But I will not be manipulated or controlled. Not anymore. I crossed to the bookshelf and removed a large envelope hidden behind the family photos. I've made some changes, I said, returning to my seat. And since you're all so concerned about my finances and the future of this house, I think you should know about them. I opened the envelope and removed several documents, which I placed on the coffee table. First, I've updated my will, I said, tapping the top document. The house will not be left to any individual. Instead, it will be placed in a trust with specific conditions. Sharon reached for the paper, but I gently placed my hand over it. I'm not finished. I pointed to the second document. This is the rental agreement for the upstairs apartment. The renovations begin next week, and should be complete within 2 months. Mom, please, Sharon began, but I held up my hand. Finally, I said, indicating the last paper, I've established a small foundation in Harold's name. Half of my remaining assets will go there upon my death, to provide scholarships for older adults returning to education. The silence that followed was absolute. No one moved. No one spoke. You're disinheriting us? Lewis finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. No, I said gently. I'm teaching you the lesson I should have taught years ago. That love isn't measured in dollars. That respect is earned, not demanded. That I am still very much alive, and this is still very much my life. I looked at each of them in turn, meeting their eyes. The remaining assets will be divided among you, as always planned. But the truth is there's less than you thought. The house is my largest asset, and the trust ensures it will only benefit those who demonstrate the values Harold and I believed in: compassion, respect, and unconditional love. Jenny began to cry softly. Robert stared at the floor. Sharon's face was unreadable. Lewis stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. You can't do this. I already have, I said simply. He stormed out, slamming the door behind him. The others lingered, shock still evident on their faces. Mom, Sharon finally said, her voice strained. We need time to process this. Take all the time you need, I replied. I'll be here. One by one they left. No hugs, no goodbyes. Just quiet departures and the soft click of the door. Alone again, I sat in the fading afternoon light, feeling strangely peaceful. I had no illusions. Some relationships might be permanently damaged. Others might eventually heal. But for the first time in years, I had spoken my truth and stood my ground. Outside, spring was in full bloom. The dogwood tree Harold had planted was covered in white flowers, delicate as snow against the blue sky. Life continuing, renewing just as it always had. I picked up the phone and called Margaret. It's done, I said. How do you feel? She asked. I considered the question, watching a pair of cardinals build a nest in the maple tree outside my window. Free, I answered. I feel free.